We all know about the Great Wall of China, but what about a massive Indian wall that was created from thorny shrubs and brushwood? This wall ran through the heart of India. It was smaller than the famous Chinese wall, but still extremely long and impressive. Why did we hear nothing about it, and why did it disappear? Let's figure it out. So, it all began in the 19th century. The British Empire decided to create a large barrier along a customs line right in the heart of India. This line stretched from the state of Punjab in the northwest to Madhya Pradesh. But what was the problem with this line? In India, salt was one of the most expensive products in the country, and the tax on it was very high. People didn't want to pay these taxes, so many smugglers transported salt from coastal areas to central regions. As a result, salt lost its value, and Britain incurred significant financial losses. That's why the idea of creating a living hedge to stop smuggling appeared. The point was not to waste time and effort building a stone wall, but instead to create a barrier made of trees, plants, and dense thorny shrubs. A barrier that could grow on its own. The idea of building a living hedge only seems simple. In reality, the builders faced enormous difficulties. At first, it was built mainly from dry branches that were brought in and piled into tall heaps, but such a wall quickly fell apart and the branches had to be replaced again and again. Then, a government official and botanist named Alan Octavian Hume was appointed Commissioner of Customs. He decided to use his knowledge of gardening and botany to strengthen the hedge. Which trees were better suited for dry soil and which for wetter areas? How could the most resilient species of shrubs be grown? How to destroy parasites and how to thicken the wall so that no one could pass through it. Alan Octavian Hume had to solve these and many other questions. That is why he is credited with the greatest contribution to the creation of this project. People used various Indian trees and shrubs, including dwarf plum trees and bamboo, as well as many local plants. They did not simply pile everything together, but focused on planting and cultivation. Eventually, the length of the hedge exceeded 1,100 miles, which is roughly the distance between New York and Miami. The average height of the barrier was about 8 feet, but in some places it reached 12 feet in height and 14 feet in width. It was guarded by around 12,000 British soldiers stationed along its entire length. The cost of maintaining the wall amounted to approximately $220,716 in today's currency. Of course, this didn't stop the smugglers. Caravans of camels loaded with salt broke through the hedge. Officers often clashed with locals. The wall was destroyed not only by people but also by natural disasters. In some areas, trees don't grow because of the hot, dry climate. In other places, the wall was washed away by floods. In some regions, the soil was simply not fertile enough. They planted again and again, dug trenches, brought ground from other areas, and worked tirelessly until they found the ideal solution for each climatic zone. To create just 1 mile of the wall, builders used about 250 tons of thorny brushwood and other organic material. Each year, people transported around 100,000 tons of plant matter to reinforce weak sections of the hedge. They used almost every type of local thorny shrub. In some areas where the soil was especially dry, the trees couldn't grow. Builders brought in tons of other soil, dug up the top layer, and replanted everything. In addition to this, people faced many problems that interfered with construction. For example, white ants attacked the hedge and destroyed large sections of the wall. Forest fires burned trees for many miles and deprived builders of construction material. Storms, hurricanes, and whirlwinds tore down parts of the wall. Builders had to construct large embankments to protect the wall from floods. One of the most unpleasant challenges was locust invasions. Just imagine millions of flying, buzzing insects swarming the wall and eating all the vegetation. Parasitic vines grew around the trees and simply destroyed them. In one area, rats appeared, and builders brought in a group of wild cats to fight the rodents. All the work to build the hedge took about 30 years. When the wall was completed, it was divided into about 100 sections, each guarded by patrol services. Of course, gaps still remained in the wall. Smugglers broke through it, throwing sacks of salt over the top or climbing the trees within the wall. Officers constantly clashed with them. After such massive and exhausting work, the wall was expected to last a very long time, but in 1879 it was no longer needed. The salt tax began to be collected directly at production sites, making smuggling pointless. Once the wall stopped being maintained, it began to deteriorate and overgrow. In some places, it was dismantled and used for firewood. In other areas, natural disasters finished it off. In modern times, it's almost impossible to find the remains of the hedge. Some sections of it were turned into roads. All the information we know about this fence is stored in the books and records of various researchers who communicated with local people or were directly involved in the process. Now, let's learn something about another, much more famous wall located in China. This wall still remains the largest and most extensive structure ever built by humans. Its length is about 13,000 miles, roughly the distance from Alaska to South America. But it's not just a wall along a straight flat road. It goes up and down, twists and straightens across mountains and plateaus. It's no surprise that this massive construction was built over a span of 2,000 years. The Great Wall of China is divided into many sections and consists of towers, watch points, garrison stations, and barracks. All of this was built from bricks and cut stone blocks. To bind them together, builders used lime mortar. But not every part of the wall consists of structures with towers like the ones you see in photos and on the internet. In some areas, it's simply massive ridges of compacted ground. It's hard to imagine how titanic this labor was. All of these construction materials had to be transported into the mountains. People didn't just stack bricks on top of each other. They leveled the ground, reinforced the foundation, and built day after day, year after year, generation after generation. Today, many parts of the Great Wall of China are destroyed. Some elements were ruined by natural disasters, others by erosion, and many sections were destroyed by people. Some of the damage is connected to interesting legends. One of them tells the story of Lady Meng Jiang. Her husband was sent to build the Great Wall of China. For a long time, she received no news from him, so one day she decided to visit him and bring him winter clothes. When she arrived at the wall, she learned that her husband was no longer alive. Lady Meng Jiang wept bitterly in her grief. According to the legend, her sorrowful crying caused part of the wall to collapse. Millions of people built the wall over the course of 2,000 years. And this raises a question. Why? What was the point of all this construction? One of the main reasons was to protect the country from enemies. Essentially, the entire Great Wall of China is a long defensive line. The wall also helped unite and preserve the unity of fragmented states that eventually formed a single China. But what purpose does it serve today? It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It represents a symbol of culture, unity, and the history of the country. And from an economic point of view, it attracts millions of tourists from all over the world. Did you know that India is building a megastructure visible from space? It's happening in Andhra Pradesh, a region home to 50 million people and some of the worst climates on Earth. When it rains here, it pours enough to cause massive floods. When it dries, it turns fertile ground into a wasteland. This ambitious construction is supposed to solve the issue once and for all. However, if this multi-billion-dollar project backfires, the consequences could be devastating. Let's see why. The second longest river in India is called the Godavari. During the monsoon season, this river acts like a fire hose that nobody can turn off. We aren't talking about a drizzly afternoon. From June to September, the sky practically unzips. The water level rises and the river transforms from a calm stream into a chaotic force that swallows entire villages in days. But that's not all. A huge amount of that fresh water goes completely to waste. It rushes past the villages and dumps straight into the Bay of Bengal. Once it hits the salty ocean, it's useless for drinking or farming. We're talking about billions of gallons of much-needed water disappearing into the sea every single year. Now, on the other hand, we have the Krishna River Basin, just a few hundred miles away. There, it's literally the opposite issue. Farmers are staring at dry cracks in the ground. They're praying for rain that never comes. And Krishna does not get strong monsoon support, and most of its water is already used up before it even reaches this region. By the time it arrives, it's more like a tired stream than a healthy river. That's why the authorities looked at the map and came up with a solution. Basically, take the excess water from the angry river and push it over to the dry river. This brings us to the Polavaram. The engineers are building a structure that's a giant machine, not just a wall. It's built to connect these two massive water systems, like running a giant pipe from the side that has too much to the side that has almost nothing. The project combines a massive earth and rock dam with a hydropower plant and a network of canals. However, the most impressive part of this layout is the spillway. It's a giant complex of concrete, channels, and support systems. It looks less like a dam and more like a fortress built for titans. It's a gigantic safety valve for the earth. It stretches for close to a mile across, wider than 10 football fields placed side by side, and rises several dozen feet above the riverbed. It's fitted with dozens of huge steel gates, each one weighing hundreds of tons, and built to hold back walls of water until the system decides to let them go. The spillway is incredibly powerful. It has a discharge of around 5 million cusecs. In simple terms, it can blast out millions of cubic feet of water every single second. That puts it in the same league as the spillway at China's Three Gorges Dam, one of the most powerful flood control structures on the planet. Engineers designed it to handle what they call a 1,000-year flood. And no, that doesn't mean you need to mark your calendar for the year 3026. It just means there's a 0.1% chance that a flood this massive will hit the valley in any given year. Why are the architects so obsessed with these safety statistics? Because the location leaves no room for error. The Godavari Delta downstream is home to millions of people. If this project backfires, meaning the dam breaches or the gates fail during a storm, it wouldn't just be a leak. It would be a human-made tsunami. The water meant to save the region would instead wipe it off the map. The construction pace of the Polavaram project matches this insane scale. In 2019, the workers on this site set a Guinness World Record. They poured 42,000 cubic yards of concrete in exactly 24 hours. If you loaded all that concrete into standard mixers, you would fill 4,000 trucks. Line them up bumper to bumper, and you'd get a traffic jam stretching for 22 miles. Even with that in mind, the project still has a way to go. It's so big that it starts to bend its own surroundings. It won't just stop or redirect water. It might change the air itself. Once the dam is complete, it will hold a reservoir so large that it'll function like a brand new inland sea. Put that much water under the Indian sun and something obvious will happen. It'll lift into the air. Day after day, the surface will turn into a giant steam engine sending moisture upward. Scientists call this a microclimate, but we call it accidental weather control. By creating a massive body of water, you change the local humidity and temperature. You're essentially installing a giant humidifier in a region that used to be dry. This is the part that makes experts nervous. What if they accidentally create a new climate problem while trying to solve the current one? Once you block a river and create a lake this big, you start messing with the heat and moisture in the air above. The system meant to control water on the ground ends up influencing the weather overhead too. Then there is the issue of moving the water. Picture the state as two giant tanks. One is overflowing and about to burst. The other is dry. The engineers are trying to connect them with a massive pipe to balance the levels before either one becomes a disaster. How are they doing this? To pull this off, they're carving out the earth, digging two massive canals, each stretching more than 100 miles. These aren't simple ditches, they're artificial rivers carved to ignore the natural layout of the land and go where engineers tell them to go. In 2022, monsoon floods slammed into the site mid-build. Water forced its way past temporary barriers and damaged critical leak control work. The crew had to stop, assess the damage, and start restoring the damaged sections. And the risks aren't just about concrete breaking. The real cost of this project is human. To build the City of Water, you have to remove the real cities of people. When the reservoir fills, it will submerge nearly 250 square miles of land. That much water does not make room for anyone. Close to 200,000 people would have to be relocated. Old forests, tribal lands, and villages that stood for generations will disappear beneath the surface. This is the price of the project. So, with all this concrete and chaos, when does the ribbon get cut? Here's the twist. This project has been ongoing since the 1940s, back when the British were still in charge. The foundation stone appeared in 1980. Real work waited until 2004. It's a rare piece of infrastructure that has outlived conflicts and economic crashes, yet it's still under construction. Major parts of the main dam are incomplete. The reservoir cannot be filled to its full height, and key power systems have not been installed. Several resettlement zones also remain unfinished, which means the final stage of the project is still years away. Aside from the ambition and the scale, money is also the reason it takes so long. Early plans estimated about $1.5 billion. Today, the cost has passed $6.5 billion and keeps climbing. But is it worth the price? Depends on who you ask. For the farmers watching their fields dry out, the answer is yes. For the families watching their homes get swallowed by the reservoir, the answer is no. The latest deadline for completion is by the end of this decade, so there are no more excuses. The Polavaram project is a testament to human ambition. It's humans looking at Mother Nature and saying, "I think you put that river in the wrong place. Let me fix that for you." Will it work? And how well? We'll find out soon. Until then, the Godavari will keep flowing and overflowing while the Krishna will keep shrinking, looking like an abandoned movie set.
Well, here you are, on a week-long trek through the Himalayas. You're exhausted, the cold is cutting through to your bones, and suddenly, you stumble upon a human skeleton near a lake. You look around, and there are dozens, maybe even hundreds of bones scattered across the ground. Well, guess what? This really happened in 1942 with an Indian forest official. Since this chilling discovery, researchers have been trying to figure out how so many people lost their lives in such a remote, isolated spot. So, what happened up there? We're talking about Rupkund, a lake sitting at over 16,000 feet in the Himalayas. But it's not just known by that name. People also call it Mystery Lake, or even more bizarrely, the Skeleton Lake. This place is remote, I mean really remote. It's not just because it's insanely high up, but also because it's surrounded by snow-covered mountains. Now, if you're planning to go there, make sure you have some solid hiking shoes. It's a week-long trek covering more than 30 miles of tough, rugged terrain. Along the way, you'll pass through all kinds of challenging landscapes: moss-covered oak forests, misty fields with an eerie vibe, and up at the top, snow. The highest point of the trek is a knife-edge ridge called Junargali. Just below that lies Rupkund. The closer you get to the lake, the darker the atmosphere feels. And on the ground, you can find human skeletons scattered around, belonging to more than 300 people. Along with them, there were things like wooden artifacts, leather slippers, and rings. Okay, so something really macabre happened here. But what? Well, we have three main theories. Theory number 1, the local legend. According to this story, a long time ago, a king named Raja Justival went on a pilgrimage deep into the Himalayas to reach a sacred mountain temple. He brought his pregnant queen, Rani Balumpa, along with a group of servants, dancers, and others. While they were up in the mountains, a massive hailstorm hit, or as the legend goes, an angry deity started hurling iron balls from the sky. Either way, the storm was brutal, and they had nowhere to take shelter. In the end, they all lost their lives near the lake. Theory number 2, an escape route. Some say the remains belong to Indian soldiers who tried to invade a foreign territory back in 1841, but they were defeated. Over 70 of them were forced to make their way back home through the Himalayas, and they met a tragic end along the way. Theory number 3, a mass grave. This theory suggests that some kind of widespread health issue hit the group. They were all buried there, in isolation, to prevent the disease from spreading. In this case, Rupkund Lake and its surroundings would basically be a cold, remote cemetery. Now, do you know what all these theories have in common? They all assume that the skeletons belong to a single group of people who died in one catastrophic event. But then science came along and things got way creepier. In 2019, 28 scientists from institutions in the US, India, and Germany teamed up for 5 years to figure out what the heck happened up there. They studied the remains of 38 individuals, 23 men and 15 women. And right there, we can already toss out theory number 2. That's important because if these people had been soldiers on a military mission, you would expect most, if not all of them, to be men. Armies in the past were almost entirely male. But here, there were just too many women for that to make sense. And on top of that, no signs of combat or military gear were found at all. After a genetic analysis, researchers noticed that the individuals weren't part of the same family, at least not by blood, like third-degree relatives or closer. And most importantly, they were mostly healthy. These two facts help rule out theory number 3. It probably wasn't some kind of highly contagious health problem. But the most shocking part is that these skeletons didn't belong to just one single group. They actually came from 3 distinct groups. The first group had ancestry that falls within the range of present-day South Asians, basically from the regions that are now India, Pakistan, and Nepal. The second group had ancestry typical of Eastern Mediterranean, just like people from today's Greece, or more specifically from Crete. And they also identified one individual with Southeast Asian related ancestry. The dating also shows that these remains weren't deposited at the same time. In other words, groups 1 and 2 didn't live during the same period. Their deaths were actually spread out over as much as 1,000 years. Oh great! Now theory number 1 is out the window too. After all, the studies can confirm that these people passed away in at least 2 separate tragic events. According to the researchers, there is a possible clue about where at least some of the people with South Asian ancestry might have come from, or why they were even up there in the first place. Rupkund Lake isn't part of any major trade route or anything like that, but it is along the path of a pilgrimage called the Nanda Devi Raj Jat. It still happens today, once every 12 years, where people hike through the mountains for worship and celebration. Now, the written records of this pilgrimage only show up around the late 1800s, but there are inscriptions in nearby temples that go way back, like to the 8th or 10th century. So, it's possible the tradition started much earlier, and maybe some of these people passed away during one of those early pilgrimages, due to a heavy storm or some other natural disaster. Okay, but how do we explain the group that came from Greece? Well, that's definitely more puzzling. First, because there aren't any historical records or evidence to explain who these people were or what they were doing in the far reaches of the Himalayas, so it's hard to know where to start. The study suggests that they could have been a group of unrelated men and women born in the Eastern Mediterranean region around the time the Ottoman Empire controlled that area. The evidence suggests that they had a diet mostly based on land-based foods, not the seafood you would expect from people living near the coast. So they might have lived inland and somehow ended up in the Himalayas, possibly traveling for reasons that researchers can't fully explain yet. The best guess is that they were also participating in a pilgrimage, but honestly, it seems pretty unlikely that people from Europe would have traveled all the way to Rupkund just to do that. And let's assume they did. What exactly happened to them? I mean, how did they all pass away in the same exact spot? Well, the researchers can't say for sure, but people online love to speculate. You think? Some suggest that they fell from the Junagarli Ridge, or since they were at such a high altitude, maybe they passed away due to acute mountain sickness. Up there, the oxygen levels are much lower, which can lead to things like headaches, vomiting, and dizziness. The problem is, it can escalate quickly, and if it affects your lungs and brain, it can become life-threatening. So yeah, it could have happened. But it's still strange to think it happened to so many people all at once. We definitely still need a lot more answers when it comes to Rupkund. But one of the obstacles researchers face is that the site remains highly disturbed and unpreserved. Over the years, trekkers have moved around the skeletons, or worse, some have even taken them home as macabre souvenirs. But the more we mess with those remains, the harder it becomes to find an accurate answer in the future, no matter how much science advances. So, for now, the Mystery Lake will remain exactly that, a big mystery.